A moment in time and history. The tiny Pacific island of Kiribati, 14 hours ahead of London, the first place to greet the first seconds of the year 2000. On the island of Tonga, the Christian significance of the moment was marked with the singing of Handel's Messiah. Moving west, 1 hour later, midnight approached Auckland, New Zealand. New Zealand is the first industrialised nation to cross the threshold to the Millennium year. The sky over Auckland Harbour was flooded with the light of hundreds of fireworks. On the ground, the first real test of the arrangements to guard against the Millennium computer bug and protect public safety. First reports suggest that all has gone smoothly. Married at the stroke of midnight, a couple on the Chatham Islands. Thousands of miles to the south, midnight at the Scott Research Centre in Antarctica, where the summer sun never sets and where a group of scientists were able to witness the first light of the year 2000. Within the past few minutes, midnight has reached the city of Sydney in Australia, where more than 1 million people have been watching 20 tons of fireworks lighting up the sky. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Here, last-minute preparations for the Millennium celebrations are underway. Special events, including firework displays and torchlight processions, will take place throughout the United Kingdom.
On the banks of the River Thames, cannon fire marked the start of the biggest celebrations the country has ever seen. London is the scene for the most extravagant festivities. The new big wheel, the London Eye, will not be taking passengers tonight because of safety problems, but with all other events going ahead, the police are gearing up to receive several million visitors this evening. A large area of central London has been cordoned off. Scotland Yard is on a high state of alert.
We anticipate the crowds will be good-natured and well-behaved, and we encourage them to be well-behaved as well as to enjoy themselves. We think we are pretty well prepared.
All over the country, fireworks are being readied on an unprecedented scale. This was the preparation in Southampton, but every major city is planning its own show. At Edinburgh Castle, a Millennium beacon will be lit. Even by the standards of a city famous for celebrating New Year's Eve, tonight's party looks set to be very special. David Shrookman, BBC News.
And for the latest on how the so-called Millennium bug is affecting our lives, over to Peter Snow.
Well, Peter, the world's holding its breath, but at the moment the little bugs you see crawling all around these computers behind me don't seem to be biting too hard. The first signs are good. Let's look at our Bugwatch map of the world. New Zealand, 2 hours from midnight now, and only in Morrinsville, up there on the North Island just south of Auckland, has there been some trouble with a water and electricity plant. A lot of wind there, that may be causing it. It may not be the Millennium bug altogether. That's the real problem, is you can't be sure with all these troubles that may hit us tonight whether or not they're bug caused. Now we can move on. In Australia, you saw the Australians there just into midnight, to Europe, where, interestingly, 10 hours before Italy is even due to become a Millennium country, a bug appears to have struck. Italian telecoms report that what has happened is that when you send emergency radio signals from boats to shore stations, they are actually saying it's 1980, it's not 2000. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. A 33-year-old man has appeared in court charged with the attempted murder of the former Beatle George Harrison and his wife Olivia. Michael Abram was bailed by magistrates to be detained at a medium-secure psychiatric unit. I'm joined from outside the court by our correspondent Stephen Cape. Stephen, what was said in court?
Well, simply, Michael Abram was flanked by 2 prison officers as he arrived, cuts and bruises on his face. As you know, he's charged with 2 offences of attempting to murder George Harrison and his wife, Olivia. After the 45-minute hearing, the magistrate, Tim Pocock, said because of the exceptional circumstance, he agreed that Abram should go to this secure unit, the Scott Clinic on Merseyside, where there's a bed waiting, where he can receive treatment under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act.
So a remand of this type in a case of alleged attempted murder is very unusual.
It is unusual, and certainly the magistrates went away to consider it. Submissions were made during the hearing, and that was the decision that was reached. But it should be said that after 6 weeks, there will be another court hearing. Abram will be back in court, and then the whole situation will be reassessed.
Stephen Cape, thank you. Stars from stage and screen dominate this year's Millennium New Year honours list. The former James Bond star Sean Connery gets a knighthood, and Elizabeth Taylor, Julie Andrews and Shirley Bassey all become dames.
Elizabeth Taylor, a screen icon of the 20th century, is rewarded as much for her legendary roles in the world of film as her dedication to fighting AIDS. She's made a dame.
What do you think about all the kerfuffle over the OBE, or rather the non-OBE?
That's somebody else to answer, nothing to do with me.
That was 2 years ago when Sean Connery was controversially denied a place in the honours list amid a political row over his staunch support for the Scottish National Party. This time around, the actor best known for his suave and sophisticated portrayal of James Bond has had the last laugh, having been knighted. Actress Barbara Windsor endeared herself to the nation as the buxom blonde in many a saucy carry-on film. She gets an MBE. Henry Cooper, who famously stunned the boxing world when he nearly knocked out Muhammad Ali, also gets a heavyweight honour. He's now Sir Henry. And more honours to commemorate England's proudest footballing achievement, winning the 1966 World Cup. This time MBEs go to the so-called forgotten heroes Alan Ball, George Cohen, Roger Hunt, Nobby Stiles and Ray Wilson. And there's an uplifting knighthood for the adventure-loving entrepreneur Richard Branson, one of 2,000 Millennium Honours recipients.
That's it for now. Is the weather making any concessions to the celebratory mood? Helen Young will tell us.
Well, it's not going to be terribly good tonight, I'm afraid. There's going to be some rain around, but I thought I'd start first of all in Europe. Take a look at this. In Greece, we've seen quite a bit of rain falling in 24 hours going into this morning, and it's all due to a horrible little area of low pressure. Here it is, this troublesome one here. It's going to mean a lot of clouds still in that area right the way through the rest of today and into tonight. So not good news for those celebrating the Millennium across in Greece. But as you can see, there's also cloud back up to the northwest around us, and certainly here there's going to be cloud, I think, maybe even some drizzle in London. But what about the places in between? Well, here it looks as though it will be much clearer. We've got high pressure present, as you can see. The low pressure is trapped on either side. And so here we're going to have a very cold night tonight. Temperatures getting down to around -7 to -18 in Moscow. And you can see Athens there far higher with that cloud, rain, sleet and snow. Temperatures around +9 degrees. Well, if we take a look at Europe, it's going to be staying cold on the eastern side, that cold air continuing to push its way up towards the northeast, which leaves us in relatively mild air. So there's the good news for you. Although it may be fairly cloudy tonight and fairly cloudy in parts tomorrow, at least it will be on the mild side. Well, let's take a look at that rain. Here it is, pushing its way into the northwest. It really has been gathering this morning across Scotland, across parts of Northern Ireland. And the clouds, as you can see, extending across many areas. What it doesn't show you here is that we had a lot of mist and fog this morning, and that is still lingering around just at the moment. The strongest winds are in the northwest, and it's those that are blowing on that cloud across northern and western Scotland and also Northern Ireland. So this afternoon, a cloudy affair, a fairly misty, murky affair as well. The wettest weather really being across Northern Ireland and up into western Scotland. As we go through the afternoon and tonight, that rain will gradually push its way southeastwards. This is about midnight, and as you can see, it looks as though the wettest weather is going to be from the West Country up through the Midlands and into Lincolnshire. I think London, well, there might just be a little bit of drizzle around as midnight sounds. To the northwest, though, for Northern Ireland, for western Scotland, here far clearer at midnight, and that means it will be a little bit chilly here as well. So the temperatures in Belfast around 3, Glasgow on 5, and then that milder, wetter, cloudier conditions for many other of the major cities. Into tomorrow, well, the top temperature looks like being around London, 9 degrees there. Still that drizzle, still the misty, murky conditions to get rid of first thing in the morning. But look at that bright sunshine. Many places indeed having a fairly good day tomorrow, although Glasgow, the rain will be coming in once again there. So for tomorrow, the wet, windy weather in the northwest, dry and sunny, as you can see, right the way down until you hit the southeast corner, where it will be rather drizzly, but that will move move away, it will become much brighter during the day. So the wettest weather always in the north and the west. That's it from me. Now across to Maggie Philbin.
Yes, welcome back to the middle of the Thames to HMS Westminster. Now, I'm up on the bridge at the moment and I've been joined by her captain, Commander Jerry Stamford. And I understand that today is rather a poignant one for you because in a week's time you're leaving the ship for a desk job.
It's very sad for me. In fact, it was here that I joined the ship 18 months ago, and after a lot of shared experiences where you build a lot of friends and teamwork with the sailors on board, it's really sad for me to be leaving. So yes, it's a sad day for me.
Yeah, there's a great deal to miss, isn't there?
Oh, an enormous amount, because a ship is like a life, really. And when you spend 18 months, and in our case, you know, you train together. We went off to Africa together where we were carrying out humanitarian activities. Yes, it's very, very sad to leave them all behind.
Well, to mark this rather special day, we've got a rather special message for you. And I've noticed that your eyes have gone a little bit funny because you weren't expecting this, were you?
I certainly was not, no.
Well, an old colleague of yours, Admiral James Perone, has just got a few words for you. And I believe that you served with him. He was your captain on HMS Boxer.
That's correct.
When you were deployed in the Gulf.
That's right.
Right, well, let's just have a listen. There he is.
Hi, Jerry.
There he is.
I'm sure you're having a wonderful time there in London.
Has he changed?
No, that looks like
I'm sure you remember this ship, HMS Boxer, where you were the flight commander. I've never forgotten the day you took your helicopter and landed it on that burning tanker in order to give medical aid to the people on board. It certainly had me worried for a while, but of course you're so cool and calm, I knew you'd pull it off. Anyway, as they say here in America, have a nice day and a really happy new millennium.
And the same to you,
oh,
yes.
Oh, great.
Right.
Now tell me about that. I mean, a burning tanker, what happened?
It must have been, yes, you put me on the spot here, right? And I feel this is far more nerve-wracking than that was. Yes, that was 10 years ago, and I was serving in Boxer as the flight commander then, flying a Lynx helicopter. And yes, we were on patrol when we got a report that a tanker had been hit by a missile, and the tanker was on fire, and that medical aid was required by some of the people on board. So I had to fly and land on this tanker amongst the flames and the smoke, although it was actually reasonably safe, to land the ship's doctor, who could then carry out first aid on the people on board.
Well, I don't know, I think you're being a little bit modest here, because we've brought on board Nick Clark, who was flying with you.
Happy New Year.
No.
And Happy New Year to you. Apologise.
Is he playing this down a little bit?
Just a little bit, actually, Maggie. We had 2 aircraft on board, in fact, and when Admiral Perone got the message that this tanker was in trouble, we got the order to scramble both aircraft. Unfortunately, his aircraft, and I will always say it was his aircraft, was unserviceable, so he took my aircraft with the doctor and Mark Graham, the observer, to go and tender aid. Whilst he was away, and bear in mind that he had no cover from airborne at that stage, there was no other aircraft to back him up. We were desperately trying to get the other aircraft serviceable with Dave Spencer, the engineer, and convince Captain Perone, as he was then, that we should get airborne to help him.
Oh.
But of course, Jerry, being cool, calm and collected, had sorted it out by the time we got serviceable.
Nick, your words are very kind. I think he is making more of it than there was.
No, I know that you two have got lots and lots to catch up on, but I'm going to interrupt you because we have another message, and this one is also from the States. I'm going to give you a bit of a clue. You haven't seen or been in touch with this person for over 10 years, and you're at Naval College at Dartmouth with him. So see if you can work out who it is.
Hey, Jerry. Sorry I can't make the celebration. I'm back in the States now, living in Norfolk, Virginia. Do you remember the time back at BRNC Dartmouth at one of the formal mess dinners when you got a trout bone halfway stuck through your cheek? That was a sight, and you delivered your speech in a flawless manner, the true professional that you are. I want to say Happy New Year to you and your family, and best wishes in the new millennium, and make sure you avoid the fish in the year 2000.
Now, do you remember that incident?
I do very much, yes. Yes, that's Mike DeShiel, yes, an American colleague of mine, yes.
And I understand you used to play quite a lot of tennis with him.
Yes, well, he, in fact, was a very professional tennis player, and I was a very amateurish one, so I learned a lot from him.
Just have a look over
tennis,
there.
anybody?
You thought he was thousands of miles away, but we brought him back in. What are your memories of the captain?
Jerry was a great tennis player. He had always remember his cracking forehand. And we were a great doubles team together. Had a great time serving with him.
Is he a good loser as well as a good winner?
Oh, he doesn't lose often, but yeah, he's a good loser.
Well, I needed to be a good loser playing against him, so...
Well, I know you've got lots and lots to talk about, and it's very sort of frustrating for everyone that we've got to break away now. But I guess you never dreamt you'd be bringing in the new Millennium with two of your closest friends. So please, please enjoy it. And we will go over to Katie Hill, who I believe is at the Eye. Was that a surprise,
It was
sir?
a total surprise, yes. But thank you very much indeed.
Oh, I tell you what, I do love a good surprise, and we are in fact just down the river from HMS Westminster, standing just underneath the London Eye, and the banks of the river from 2 o'clock onwards are going to be the centre of live music for the capital. One of the big sound stages is behind me. There are 6 dotted on the banks of the river, and as you can see, crowds have started to gather. Are you looking forward to the Millennium, people? Yeah. Very excited. We're all revving up for that big midnight, but of course, while we're getting ready to enjoy the passing and the revelling, some people are actually going to be working, like this poor gentleman here. What are you going to be doing all day?
Well, just securing the whole area for tonight, early as the morning. That's it.
But you must have seen everything getting ready and the wheel going up and all that kind of thing. What are you looking forward to seeing most?
Everyone come down, have a good time, enjoy themselves, and really enjoy the Millennium.
Hopefully not misbehaving.
Obviously not.
But if they do, these gentlemen are also on hand. What's your name, sir?
It's Gavin.
And how long are you working here today?
I think, Katie, we're going to be here probably until about 9 o'clock this evening.
Right, and how are you going to be celebrating from then on?
Well, I think I'm probably going to be at home, putting my feet up with a beer with my lovely wife.
Oh, we like that, don't we? And what about you? What's your name?
Paul.
And what time are you off duty today?
Same time as Gavin.
Yeah. So you must have, been aware of all the festivities going on around you today. What are you looking forward to seeing most while you're actually on duty, out of the corner of your eye?
The bands on the GLR stage behind you.
Fantastic. They're coming on, I think, about 2 o'clock. They've just been doing a little bit of sound checking. Well, enjoy the Millennium, won't you all? And we're getting very excited down here. And I think it's back to that lovely legend in the studio that is Michael Parkinson. Michael, are you there?
Legend, she calls it.
Legend.
Legend. Are you, you've changed?
I've changed.
How many more are we going to go through before you finish your stint?
Sorry, another 6.
Another 6?
Actually, it's because I get very smelly, to be honest.
Oh, I see.
It's like he's not smell-o-vision.
Well, I'm going in 25 minutes, so you'll be rid of me. To change, of course.
Yes.
Right, with Australia and New Zealand now in the year 2000, here's Peter Snow with a look at how the world's coping with that Millennium bug so far.
Well,
Peter.
My goodness, Michael, we are on tenterhooks here, bugs crawling all over our picture behind me, but no clear indication that the bugs are striking here very hard. Here's our Bugwatch world map. Now, that line, watch it all the next 24 hours, is the midnight line moving now into Australia. Sydney's past midnight. New Zealand, 2 hours past midnight. Now, in New Zealand, there has been one incident. A place called Morrinsville here. There's been an electric water plant that's gone down. It's reckoned that's the bad weather, but nobody can be sure. Now, I will take you straight over now to Italy, where, oddly enough, there's been some very odd thing happening. The Telecoms Italia report that the bug does appear to have struck. Apparently, boats sending messages ashore, and the date is coming up under the message 1980. Now, Julian Hindle is in Japan, and she's waiting there, some 3 hours away from midnight in Japan. Tell us what's happening there. Julian, what do you expect the bug to do there?
Well, we've already seen a little bit of trouble. Mobile phones are proving to have some problems. They can't tell the right date. This phone, for example, says it's Sunday. Some other phones say it's December 31st in the year 2000. Doesn't mean you can't use the phone, but it does seem to indicate that there may be a few more problems to come.
All right, Julian, well, thank you very much. Back to you as soon as we hear more. Bill Thompson's with me. Bill, I've just been given a watch. So I gather there's a Millennium watch. Apparently at midnight here, 10 hours time, whatever, a little bug will start running all around it like that. The watch will then go completely scatty for 24 hours. I think I'm going to drop it.
I think it's just what you need. We don't really want to know what the time is tomorrow.
But now, seriously, first indications.
Well, I think it's actually very reassuring so far that there have been no major outbreaks in the power industry, water, I mean, apart from the small thing you talked about in New Zealand. Things are actually looking a lot better than we thought they would. You must remember, though, that New Zealand, Australia, Japan are all islands, and as we move into the continental countries, into the larger continents, where a lot of systems are linked together, there is a danger that one country that is unprepared could cause a domino effect and lead to trouble elsewhere. So I think we still need to look out for that.
We'll see later on. Back to you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. We're discussing the bug behind you, actually, because that's
Keep
horrible,
going.
that bug that crawls around behind you.
It's
It's a
horrible.
cockroach.
It's horrible.
Now, at special times of the year like this, hospitals like to send home as many patients as possible so that they can be with their friends and families. Nick Knowles is at Southampton City Hospital seeing people off the premises, but he has got to stay there all night with his crew. Nick Knowles, are you there? And who's your team? Who's working with you, please?
It's Ian and Handy Andy, not the one off the DIY programme, obviously, but Andy that you know, who you bought boots for recently.
Yes, I did. Now, don't give away too many secrets, Nick. We want to see the patients and the staff, please.
OK, well, there is one particular person who's been a real character who's been treated here on the children's ward, and I have some fantastic news about him. He is, of course, a 7-year-old Joshua Gook, who is a character in a million, and your friend of mine. We've met many times over the last few weeks, and he is, of course, as his mum has told us, a child in a million as well. But the important thing about him is he has been suffering from a very serious illness.
Joshua's got a form of cancer called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma T-cell.
Which must have come as a terrible shock to you.
Out of the blue. I mean, he's a very fit, healthy boy normally.
What does Mummy mean, into the blue, into the blue?
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue means it's a big surprise.
Yeah, a big shock.
Big shock for everybody. The illness means 2 years of treatment, but after responding well to his first block of chemotherapy, he wanted to share his experience of hair loss to help other kids.
OK, tell me about your hair.
Well, I knew that it wasn't going to be forever, because my dad has lost some of his hair, and I know his hair's gone forever.
And here is the boy himself. Joshua, did you have a good Christmas?
Yes, I did.
Jolly good. Did Santa arrive at your house?
Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm. Did he bring you anything special?
He brought me a big lion that was about that big.
Sure. Anything else special?
One of the things he bought me was a fire engine, and that was about the same size, and you could open the doors and put people inside.
Fantastic. I got socks. I think most dads get socks, don't they? Now, you've got some important information for Gaby, haven't you? Well, she's just through there, so you say hello. Go on.
Happy New Year, Gaby. And can you hear me? Can you hear me, Gaby? Gaby, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Joshua, I can hear you. Oh! Josh! Joshua! Oh, bless you! Oh! Joshua, come here. Oh, my good God! How are you?
Okay.
Oh, fantastic. This is the best kid in the world. How are you?
Okay.
Come on, come and sit up here with us. What, did you know about this?
No idea.
Oh.
Hi, Joshua.
Joshua, Michael
nice
and
to see you.
Peter.
Hello. Good to see you. Nice to see you.
OK,
Do you
Josh.
want to sit in my chair? You sit there, look. You sit there.
Joshua, how are you?
Yes, it is.
What's the latest
There
with your
we are.
treatment?
Well, the latest treatment I had a leg infection from asparaginase that was going through it, and at the end, my leg got quite poor. So what I had to do is I had to sort of like toddle sort of thing.
Yeah. And how about all the tubes and everything you had and your chemotherapy?
Yeah, that's gone quite well.
And your tumour, your cancer?
That's gone very well too.
Joshua, do you know what? This is the best surprise I could have had in the whole wide world, especially seeing you looking so well. Thank you for coming and surprising me. Are you going to stick around?
Yes.
Fantastic.
I think he's a television natural.
Hey, totally.
He's better at camera than any of us.
You are such a star. Come here, come and sit here.
OK,
Michael
Joshua.
can have a seat back.
OK.
You share with
All
me.
right, Joshua,
Don't
let
go
me
away.
you have a read of this to me. During the Second World War, enemy bombing devastated many cities in the British Isles. Can you see it? Moving on. One of these was Plymouth, a target because of its position as a Keane naval port. Angela Rippon is at the Guildhall with some of the people who remember those days. Angela.
Well, I guess, Michael, today most people are quite rightly looking forward into the new millennium. But just for the next couple of minutes, we're going to take you back the best part of 60 years to the years 1941 and 43. That's when Plymouth was one of the most bombed cities in the whole country. The German bombers were actually aiming for the Devonport Naval Dockyard, which is just around the corner from here, but an awful lot of the incendiary bombs ripped the heart out of the city, something that's actually commemorated in one of the stained glass windows here in the Plymouth Guildhall, which is where you join us now. As you can imagine, at that time, thousands of people were either killed or injured, and it was absolute chaos. And to add to the confusion, there were thousands of servicemen from all over the world stationed here. Now, the thing was what to do with them, not only to keep them occupied, but also to keep people's spirits up during those really dark days of the war. Well, someone came up with the idea of having tea dances up on Plymouth Hoe and in whatever other location they could possibly find that hadn't been bombed. They were a huge hit, as you can imagine, and right now, here in the Guildhall, we're recreating those tea dances from the 40s. Well, we've got a recreation, but someone who can tell us exactly what they were like, because she was a young girl who was in Plymouth at the time, is Marjorie Draper. She's twice been the mayor of Plymouth. Just tell us, Marjorie, what were those dances like in those days?
We never very impromptu, Angela. We never knew they were going to take place or not. We just all went up to the Hoe Promenade and hoped. And Lady Aston would come out from Three Alley Terrace together with Lord Aston. And she would be wearing those wonderful, elegant, feathered hats and the pearls, of course. And she would lead the dancing with Lord Aston.
But you never knew where they were going to have them, did you?
No, we just had to take pot luck.
Because all the main places were being bombed. And what about the musicians? How did they find them? The musicians, how did they find them?
With difficulty. They were normally very old.
Of course they were. But what about the dances themselves? What sort of dances did you do?
They were mostly foxtrots, waltzes, and quick steps, that kind of thing. Very strict tempo dancing.
But what happened in 1943 when the Americans arrived?
When the Americans came in spring 1943, the whole thing changed. You know, we English girls had never seen jitterbugging or jiving, and it was all very new to us. We didn't know what to do. We had to be taught. But of course it caught on very quickly.
And I gather that the Americans were actually quite brash in the way they asked you to dance.
Whereas an Englishman would ask you, Raymond, would you like to dance? They just yank you in.
Hence the term yanks. And you joined the Wrens a bit later on in the war. Did you, like everybody else, then have to dance in your uniform?
Oh, yes. Yes, we all did.
Everybody had to dance in their uniforms.
Yes.
And you had a terrific choice of people to dance with. It must have been a great time for young girls.
You see, the Polish Navy were here at the beginning of the war, and then they were very quickly followed by the Free French, and then our friends from the Commonwealth, the Australians, the Canadians, and the New Zealanders, and then, of course, the Yankees.
Well, it must have been a great time to be a young woman, I think. Now, we've actually got a band that are called the Skyliners who are playing for us today. But in the 1940s, they had some really terrific bands, including one of the most famous in the world, the Glenn Miller Orchestra. And someone who has great memories of that is Nicky Nicholas. How did you get to meet the Glenn Miller Band, Nick?
Well, the American camp, which was at Shapter's Field, was near my mother and father's pub, which was in a dockside area at the time. And of course, I had honorary membership to the United States Navy. So I was allowed to go into the camp and see everything. And Glenn Miller's band was down here to play for the troops. And of course, it was 1944. I was 12 years old. And I was fascinated to see them practicing every day in the big hall they had there.
But they asked you to sing with them, didn't they?
Well, the song they're playing now, funny enough, was one they were going to make with Bing Crosby. And did you ever swing on the stars? So on the last day they said, come on kid, come up and sing Bing's part. So that's what I did. So I was lucky enough to meet Glenn Miller and of course see a 69-piece band in operation.
And you sang with the Glenn Miller Band. How terrific. Now you mentioned Lady Astor earlier, Marjorie. She was, I've heard stories about Lady Astor actually nipping over the wall from her house at Elliot Terrace and joining in the dancing with anybody that she could find on the Hoe. Is that true?
Yes, if Lord Astor wasn't there, she was just a sailor to lead the dance off with her.
Dance off with a sailor? Well, I think that's our cue to dance. Because you were a sailor.
I joined the Navy.
Well, we've got someone to dance with you as well, Marjorie. We've got to. And if it was good enough for Nancy Astor, it was good enough for me. We'll see you later. Are you going to sing for me?
Oh.
Thank you very much, Angela. Well, we've still got the wonderful Joshua Gook, who I met on City Hospital over the past few months, who is now in full remission. Is that true? Mm. That is the best news. And also, the hair story. Mm. How's your hair?
Very well. It's grown back quite a lot.
Could we have a look, do you think?
Show us.
There.
Very fashionable.
Good hair. Good hair. Now, also,
That's
there's
the Dennis
the
Wise
pills
record,
story.
What pill?
No, you said you've got to...
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about your pills.
Because the medicine that I was having was quite bad, and sometimes it was making me sick. So
Yeah.
and now most of my medicines, I'm going to have a tablet.
So you don't need to have the medicine anymore?
Yeah, no.
And the next 3 days you're not taking any medication? Because it's New Year?
Mm.
And you're going to stay up tonight?
Yes.
OK. Joshua, give me a kiss. Happy New Year. Wonderful.
Happy New Year to you. OK, let's go across now to Peter Snow to continue his story about time. Peter.
Mike, from the wonders of medical science to the wonders of the science of timekeeping. Now, this remarkable contraption is based on the design of a very special 18th century clock called H1, after its inventor, John Harrison. It holds the key to how Greenwich became the centre of the world for timekeeping and longitude. Part of the reason why we're celebrating tonight. Philippa is in Greenwich with the story.
The Royal Observatory is the home of the Prime Meridian and of Greenwich Mean Time. I'm standing by the actual clocks made by John Harrison, and they're absolutely mesmerising. But the real key to their magic is in how they solved the problem of longitude, how to find exactly where you are on the Earth's surface. It was always known that time could provide the key, but in the 17th century, no one believed that a clock that accurate could be made. The search was on to find a solution elsewhere. The observatory at Greenwich was set up as the home of astronomy by King Charles II to solve the problem of longitude. One of the biggest challenges to face scientists was to work out where you are on the Earth, and most thought that the stars held the answer. The search for a solution became more urgent from the 15th century as explorers sailed off looking for new lands and trading routes. Not knowing where you were was often fatal. On the 22nd of October 1707, 4 Royal Navy ships hit rocks off the Isles of Scilly. All 4 sank, with the loss of 2,000 lives. Public outrage led to the British government setting up the Board of Longitude, offering a prize of £20,000, that's more than $1 million today. Such a big cash prize sparked as much interest as our lottery. Many had ideas ranging from the ingenious to the plain wacky. The nation was gripped by longitude lunacy. It took 50 years to find the answer in this chronometer. It was made by a carpenter from Lincolnshire, John Harrison. He took on the establishment, believing the solution lay in accurate clocks. He spent his lifetime refining clock parts to make one that could work accurately at sea. For ships to work out their longitude by time, the ship's clock was set to the exact time of the home port. As they sailed around the world, they needed to measure the increasing difference between their local time and the time on the clock. 1 hour's difference equals 15 degrees of longitude. So if the ship's clock measured 1 o'clock when the sun was directly overhead, local noon, they were 15 degrees west of where they started. In his search to solve the longitude problem, Harrison made a series of masterpieces that still work today and are kept at Greenwich. Well, Dr. Kristen Lippincott is here from the Royal Observatory. Try saying that. They're stunningly beautiful clocks, but they're very special as well, aren't they?
Yes, the interesting thing about Harrison's challenge is he had to make a clock that would travel at sea. He had to perfect how to make a pendulum work when it was moving, had to work out friction. He also had to work out how to deal with oil, because in those days, if it was up in the northern parts of the world, it would freeze, and if it was down in the southern parts, it would just run right out of the clock. So he worked for about 40 years, and then what happened at the end was he ended up with H4.
Well, he's genius, isn't he? And H4 was the summation of all of that work. Why is it so significant?
Well, what he did is he took all of the machinery that was in those. It's not that he miniaturized them, but he suddenly said, a watch would work much better. So he took all of those inventions and then basically crammed them all into this small watch.
And solved it.
and solved the problem of longitude.
They said in unison. So how did all the clocks end up in Greenwich?
Well, what had happened is over this long process, basically the observatory had paid for Harrison's researches, and Neville Maskell, the 5th Astronomer Royal, just got fed up one day and went to his house in a little horse-drawn carriage and says, "That's it, we've paid for them, they're ours," and took them back to Greenwich.
How can you get fed up with the man who solved the problem of longitude? Thank you very much, Kristen. More from Greenwich later. In the meantime, how are things going in the studio?
Thank you.
Well, with the whole world in party mode. It's me.
Which camera? It's a lottery.
With the whole world in party mode, I'm happy to say, it's impossible for us to bring you absolutely everything as it happens. But Tony Robinson has more highlights of stories from around the globe. Tony.
Yes, I've been beavering away for the last hour with the BBC editors, trying to trawl out some of the most exciting stories that have been coming in from about 60 countries all around the world. And it's fascinating to see how each different country wants to see itself reflected at that moment when they turn from the 20th century into the 21st century. And I guess that's nowhere more meaningful than in Russia. We were looking at some of the pictures from Russia. This is Eastern Russia, where, of course, they're celebrating not only the Millennium, but the resignation of President Yeltsin. Hopefully, Russian politics aren't going to remain frozen in time, as they seem to have been for the last 10 years or so. This is actually on the international date line. So half of what you can see is in the 20th century, and half in the 21st century. I think it's quite a difficult way to prepare your breakfast. It's a place called Chukotka, and they celebrate not only with dancing and dog sleigh races, but with sort of throat yodeling as well. And we hear that they practice witchcraft even today. A little bit like a pub in the Kilburn High Road. Now, you may have noticed the fantastic events that we saw in Sydney, the great fireworks, and you might have seen this guy just whizzing up in the air and wondered who he was. It's part of an opera and ballet. A string quartet starts on the ground of the Sydney Opera House. Suddenly, the double bassist shoots up in the air, looking for his double bass, which is shot up in the air too. And then he discovers on the roof of the Sydney Opera House some people sleeping rough, as you would on the roof of the Sydney Opera House. It's actually performed by Circus Oz, who are part of the new circus movement, who are also inspiring the gymnasts and acrobats who are taking part in our own Millennium show. It's great to see that circus has really found itself at the beginning of the new millennium. Now this is Adelaide, named after Queen Adelaide, who married our King William IV. I think I'm right in saying he was actually living with an actress at the time that he married Queen Adelaide, and only married her because he wanted her money and someone to sire legitimate children. But at least he got the reward, she got the reward of a rather nice city named after her. Very strong on civil rights they are in Adelaide. One of my favourite cities in the southern hemisphere. Good luck to them. Have a very good new millennium, Adelaide. Plenty of fantastic pictures still coming up over the next 20 or so hours. See you later on. Gaby.
Tony, thank you very much. Wonderful. That man with his cello going up the side. That was extraordinary pictures. More of those, please, Tony.
Ever united with his cello, do you think?
I think he sort of was. But he lost his trousers, which was very worrying in the process. Now we're going back up to Edinburgh and Kirsty Walk. Afternoon, Kirsty.
Afternoon here in Edinburgh. The light is fading over the castle. The lights are coming up soon. The streets are filled with people and the police are getting ready for what will be probably the biggest Millennium party in Europe. And it has been an extraordinary year for Scotland. Some of the events of great significance have been, not least of course, the first Scottish Parliament since 1707. And this was the picture on July the 1st. Sean Connery, now of course Sir Sean Connery, Concorde coming over with the red arrows. It was Glasgow's year of architecture and design, hailed as a great success. And also on the sporting field, Paul Lawrie becomes the first Scot to win the Open on home soil since Tommy Armour's victory in 1931, also at Carnoustie. And of course, the rugby team are Five Nations champions. We mustn't lose the Tartan Army. They were in jubilant mood no matter what. They did actually reign victorious at Wembley. And of course, rumour has it that a new Blair baby might have been conceived at Balmoral. And one man for whom tonight is the end of a lot of hard work is Pete Irvin from Unique Events. He has actually organised this amazing celebration. You must be exhausted. I can see behind us the carnival with its amazing swooping. I mean, there's something in every single part of this city.
Yeah, the city is it's really come alive. It's full of visitors from all over the world and incredible atmosphere building up. But of course, we've been doing our celebrations now for several nights. Last night we had maybe 80,000 people watching the Millennium Pipers, 1,000 pipers, really stirring sight, you know, sort of hair on the back of neck kind of thing, marching from Edinburgh Castle down to the Palace. And we've already, you know, we've had big events every night, so this is us gearing up for the really big one. The really big one, the weather looks like it's holding. The police are already monitoring how many people are in the city because they've got to be very careful about that. Yeah, we, for safety reasons, we have a limit, if you like, in the capacity, and we have a sort of perimeter around the whole of the city centre. But the main street, of course, is Princes Street, where we are. It's one of the biggest arenas probably in Britain where you can all see the fireworks at once. So what have you been doing? You've been clearing your debts before Christmas, making New Year's resolutions? Well, I checked my bank account certainly, just so I can tell them in the morning how much I had. But no, mainly we've just been tidying up. It's like a roller coaster now. It's kind of nothing much I can do to make things stop or start. We're just flowing with it. And amazing. We've seen so many fireworks already, but Edinburgh's Chinese fireworks are going to be phenomenal. Yeah, we got our fireworks early in the year before the Millennium Premiums. We got them directly from China. I've got two separate firework companies. We're doing 5 sites all over the city and in the shortest time, so that it will be, I think, the biggest bangs in Britain. Biggest bangs in Britain, and now straight to Shan Lloyd in Wales.
Back to the earth and frightening away those evil spirits. And what happens is a baddie and his followers go around all the local pubs and houses and try and gain entry by challenging the people inside with traditional goods. Now, as it happens, a baddie is on his way here to the Bush Inn in St Hilary in the lovely Vale of Glamorgan. I can actually hear noises outside. Let's go, gang, let's investigate.
The man in the wad gyfeillion di newad, was the man in the wad gyfeillion di newad. I ofyn am genad, I ofyn am genad, I ofyn am genad I ganu.
Rhowch glywad wir doeddion, pa faint i'ch o ddynion. Rhowch glywad wir doeddion, pa faint i'ch o ddynion. A beth yn wych union, a beth yn wych union. A beth yn wych union i'w chenwau.
It's supposed to be frightening because it's fending away all the evil spirits.
Oh, I see. And is a horse a symbol of luck then?
Yes, horses have always been seen as very, very lucky.
And what about your blackened up face? What's all that about?
I'm in disguise. I don't want the evil spirits recognising me.
Come on, let's join the dancing and fun next door. Come on, let's go. With that, it's over to Caddy in Belfast. Let's enjoy! Whoa!
Well, as you can see here in Belfast, people are quietly heading home to reflect on the joy and significance of the new millennium with their families. How likely? Not very. They're in the pub. Here we are. Everyone's in the pub. This is the Kitchen Bar, one of Belfast's oldest. Come with me. Where everyone, as you can see, the significance of world time zones has finally hit here in Belfast. The latest excuse to raise a glass is, of course, the Australian New Year, and the guys are giving us the Waltzing Matilda. The man behind the bar that couldn't give a 4X is the bar owner, Pat Catney. How are you, Pat?
Paddy, would you like a pint, Pat?
I'd love a pint.
Good man.
How's biz?
Biz is nice, and just we're starting it off very slow and trying to pace ourselves and work ourselves into the night. There's a great old atmosphere about this city.
You see, you'll never hear that in any other town in the rest of the UK. We're pacing ourselves. This is a town of professional drinkers.
Oh, professional drinkers, and we sort of treat the drink like we treat our girls, Paddy. We like to.
Let's just leave it at that. The significance of this pub, there's quite a lot of actors over the years have drank here.
It's a very old bar in the heart of the city, and I mean, like all places, I'm sure we've come through our troubles, but we're right beside the old Empire Theatre, and that was a mecca, like, for theatre goers and for actors and actresses at the time.
Well, we've actually got two of the likely lads joining us here for a pint. Home for the new year, we've got Jimmy Ellis and Jimmy Nesbitt. Boys, what's the Australian connection?
None at all with me. I'm just here for the fun, really.
Oh, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the whole wide world.
The Belfast.
Memories here are marvellous.
And memories of Australia?
Oh, well, not Australia, but my mother's name was Matilda. And so, when my father sang Waltzing Matilda to her, he could charm a bird out of a tree.
44.
Yeah.
Far across the Irish Sea.
No.
You two men are meant to be working later on tonight, is that right?
Well, not only is Jimmy Ellis the daddy of Ulster actors, he's also a very fine poet. And he has written a poem of optimism and a bit of a prayer that we're going to say tonight in front of dear knows how many people.
It's a short one, and we're going to say it between us.
And it's a reflective piece.
I worked with this man who I'm very proud is carrying on the next generation, Jimmy Nesbitt. Proud to have worked with him 4 or 5 times.
Jimmy Ellis, Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, there's no finer place to be than here today. We're having good fun.
There's going to be 50,000 people in front of the City Hall tonight. Whenever 50,000 people, are you going to be nervous?
Not a bit. We had 50,000 people queuing up that entry there to see a play called Over the Bridge 40 years ago.
So it's nothing new for you then?
More memories, more galore, and the more the merrier tonight, and I hope we can stand up and say it.
You see, what I'm really worried about is that the boys are now, well, shall we say celebrating, it's 2 o'clock, we've got Australia, still to come we've got Tokyo, still to come we've got Japan, still to come we've got India, Rangoon. Lads, are you going to be fit for this?
And there's another 364 days before the celebration is complete.
Yes.
And the new year will hit Ballymena next Thursday, I think.
I think so.
And if we've got any Chinese, it's not going to be until February. So we've got a lot of celebrating to do. We'll hand you back. Cheers, guys.
Cheers! They are not going to be standing by tonight.
Not the idea of pacing themselves with 10 hours to go.
Pacing themselves. That is going to be amazing.
Dear
Now,
old Jimmy Ellis, good man.
Now, there are ways and ways of watching the sunset. Personally, I like to be sitting by the sea on a warm evening with a drink in my hand, the smell of a barbecue drifting across from the restaurant I'll be eating when it gets dark. Just painting a picture here. Other people, though, go to far more extraordinary lengths.
What a link that was.
Thank you. Jeremy! Jeremy!
Hello! Hello, Jeremy Clarkson.
I know some people are going to see. Some people are going to see in the new year, you know, have a party. Some people are going to say a prayer. I wanted to do something a bit memorable, so I've come down here to RAF Lynham in Wiltshire, and the idea is that I'm going to chase the sunset. The last ever one, obviously, of the 20th century, in a 2,000-mile-an-hour jet fighter. But, unfortunately, I've been in a jet fighter before, and how can I put this tactfully? I was prodigiously sick. And the RAF has explained that all their cleaning personnel are on holiday, and would I mind awfully going up instead in one of their sort of Hercules transport lorries. In fact, this very one that you see here. So we're going to be going up there and we're going to be filming the last ever sunset, bringing the pictures to you live at about 4:30, I believe. Well, hopefully anyway, because this plane was built in 1967. I think it was bought by Dennis Healy, who was running things back then. And 3 minutes ago, one of its engines was broken. In fact, the only good news that we can find really is that it's got a woman driver today. Stop laughing. Tell you what is sad, actually. This is the last sortie that will be flown this century by the RAF. And I think that's amazing, really, an organisation that's given the world Guy Gibson and Douglas Bader and The Few and so on and so forth, has been reduced as the sun goes down on the 20th century to giving joy rides to, well, blokes in anoraks like me. So that'll be me at 4:30, bringing you live pictures of the last sunset from over the Scilly Isles, which I believe to be the most western point of the British Isles. So tune in then. Back to you, Gaby.
Notice the comment about the female pilot?
She's here. She's called Ali and she's going to be driving this enormous great plane.
Good for Ali.
I know, it is good for Ali. I'm not frightened at all, Gaby.
I will
I think
see
it's
him
great.
later
I mean,
on.
the fact it was 1967.
He's still going on. Jeremy Clarkson's still talking. There's a surprise
Missing
there.
you already, Jeremy.
Now it's time to go over to Peter Sissons.
I'm sorry, you sure it's me?
No, it's a girl.
Well, I don't have...
We do apologise there. We're just sorting ourselves
Yeah,
out.
I think I was supposed to actually say that I was about to take a break.
Well,
I have to go and change my frock, you see.
We had the bong standing by, so you remember the dum 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 dum
Dum,
dum
dum,
dum
dum,
dum
dum,
dum.
and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to knock off now for a few hours.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to go and lie down in my dressing room and think pure thoughts of the evening.
Don't
And
believe a word of
in
it.
fact, we're coming back because this evening we've got the final of this Children's Promise, you know, the quiz show where the winner gets a year off work. And this, of course, we've been doing for charity. And hopefully we'll be able to announce a huge amount of money this evening.
Yeah, fingers
Kids
crossed on
Charity
that.
got.
What time will you be back then, please?
I think about 7 o'clock, that's when we start. Yeah.
Okay, go and put your feet up there.
Lenny Henry.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and all
and
that
EastEnders
stuff.
later on, all
And
sorts of
EastEnders
things.
and all that, yeah.
But now we do have our boyings together, and here's Peter Sissons with the news.
Well, today is more than a celebration. It's an opportunity to take stock. And for the next hour, we'll be reflecting on how our lives have been shaped by the century we're about to leave. The century which, despite its many proud landmarks, was the era in which man's capacity for inhumanity to man entered the age of modern warfare. So it must be right to go no further without remembering those who gave their lives that we might have a future. In 2 world wars and so many other conflicts, British servicemen and women have been killed and injured, bravely fighting to protect the freedoms and privileges that all too often we take for granted. With just a few hours of daylight remaining, in a century too often darkened by war, it's time to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice. The BBC's Brian Hanrahan is in Nottingham for a very special act of remembrance.
Peter, the choice between peace and war is still the most fundamental that we can face. And while at this end of the century and in this country, war may seem to be a very different prospect, a very distant prospect, it's not something that we can take for granted. We have to give it constant attention. The century has been full of hard-learnt lessons, and we ignore them at our peril. So here in Nottingham there is to be a traditional service of remembrance with the minute's silence. People are gathering for it now. A moment to remember the dead, but also a chance to reflect on how much our present tranquility owes to their sacrifice. A century ago, the Sherwood Forresters, the local Nottingham regiment, were just arriving in South Africa for the Boer War, a war from a different era of cavalry charges and individual combat. The Great War was to change all that.
This was war on an industrial scale. Millions of men under arms, killings by the hundreds of thousands. A complete mismatch between grand strategic objectives and the squalid slaughter required to achieve them. One man who saw the dead and the wounded firsthand still lives here in Nottingham. Manny Freeman, 102, is the last surviving Jewish serviceman from that war.
I was in this casualty clearing station for 7 months, and my job was at night to take the wounded from the big marquees as they came in from the line, and we used to take them to the different theatres, and all around us was dropping bombs and shells. Thousands and thousands of young boys were killed unnecessarily, all young boys. The lesson for the future is no wars. No wars.
None at all?
No.
Nothing?
Well, what good does it do?
So nothing is worth it? Out of that despondency came determination. They built this great memorial here in Nottingham, as they did elsewhere up and down the country. Even when times were hard, they found money for proper monuments. Never again was a prayer as much as a promise. The dates, 1914-18, were originally either side of the Central Arch. Nobody could really believe there'd ever be another war on the same scale. So the lesson that's been wrung out of this fearsome century is that goodwill and hope is not enough to keep war at bay. Peace has got to be nurtured. Modern weapons, whether they be atomic bombs or mass-produced Kalashnikovs, make killing just too easy.
Thank you, Brian. We'll be coming back to you for more from that special service of remembrance shortly. Sadly, conflict and bloodshed are about as old as humanity itself. What is different about the last century, as Brian said, is that we have industrialized warfare, applied our creativity to finding better ways to kill each other. Michael Kitchen looks back at a century of destruction.
By the year 2000, the world will have 22 million professional soldiers. Marching in single file, they would take 16 months to pass your door. By the year 2000, wars in this century will have claimed 100 million lives. 7 out of 10 of them civilians. By the year 2000, production of the world's most popular weapon, the AK-47, will top 55 million. 200,000 children under 10 will have used them. By the year 2000, global defense spending will reach $800 billion a year, the same annual cost as feeding everyone on the planet.
Of the 3 services we rely on to defend our freedoms, Greenwich, the home of time, is inextricably linked with the Navy. The place is steeped in maritime history. Ready to play its part in tonight's celebrations is HMS Westminster, currently moored in the Thames just by the Dome. And on the bridge is David Dimbleby with the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Michael Boyce. David.
Sir Michael, of course, this ship is going to be important this evening, but we're here to talk about the nature of warfare and connect it with this service of remembrance. Looking back over this century, how would you say your job as a serviceman and the other armed forces differs from what it would have been a century ago?
Well, I think today we find ourselves being held more accountable to the way we actually deploy our forces and the way we actually deploy our force. And we've seen very recently in this year, for example, in Kosovo, how important it is for us to be very precise about how we use our weapons to make sure that we inflict as little collateral damage as possible. In fact, to have no collateral damage at all, if it is at all possible.
But hang on, collateral damage, you mean not killing civilians who are not part of the action that you're involved in?
Absolutely, yes.
But this is because the services are being asked to fight a different kind of war from the First World War or the Second World War?
We find ourselves certainly in recent years more employed in helping out other countries who are in difficulty. We aren't in the business that we are in the First World War and the Second World War. We were defending our homeland.
So that if there was a war where you were defending the homeland or defending directly Britain's interests, do you think you'd still be under the same strictures? Or is it in these areas where you're being used to make a point or to change policy of another country or another government or establish international law that it becomes tricky?
I suspect we probably would, because the weapons that we have nowadays are capable of being deployed very precisely, whereas of course in previous years that wasn't the case.
But of course you have fearsome firepower built up over the Cold War years. How has the ending of the Cold War altered your view of the scale of equipment, the range of force that you have?
Well, the end of the Cold War has allowed us to reduce the size of our armed forces and indeed the amount of equipment we actually carry. We find ourselves no longer now concentrating on worrying about defence of the homeland, worrying about our sea lines of communications, and we can now be deployed to be a force for good around the world and to help on a global scale.
Why do we still have a nuclear submarine force in that case?
We believe that it's still very important for us to retain a deterrent while there are still nuclear facilities and nuclear capabilities held in other countries around the world.
I mean, there's not a conflict in this that you said a moment ago, you know, we're now into peacekeeping, but actually you're also into a major defence role.
I think that the deterrent is still very necessary as long as there are other countries which retain a nuclear deterrent themselves. And in that context, of course, that is the defence of the homeland capability.
Would you say then that in the normal role we've seen, I mean, this ship, for instance, was off Sierra Leone earlier this year, a weapon of the politician's will rather than a straight military man as a sailor or a soldier or an airman than would have been true in the First World War, say?
That may be so in the First World War, but I think that in any democracy, its armed forces are a tool of the government. They're not a tool of the armed forces.
But does it make it difficult for you to carry out the sometimes ambiguous instructions you get?
We try very hard to make sure we don't get ambiguous.
I mean, it is a problem for you. You were told you mustn't have collateral damage. That means you have to control the way you shell a city. You're told sometimes that you mustn't have casualties yourself. You mustn't take casualties because it would be politically unacceptable. Isn't that true?
It certainly puts demands on training now to make sure that we can conduct ourselves in a way which is going to satisfy the requirements of the government and indeed our own very, very precise and careful instructions we give to our commanders in the field.
But it's a conflict.
I
mean, in your mind as a military man?
I don't think so. I think that we can train ourselves to make sure that we fight and we operate in a way which is going to actually conform with what the requirements of the government are.
We've been hearing about the millions of people killed in this past century. There are a lot of people who feel that the new millennium should be a new leaf, a turning over, a change in attitude. Do you see any hope of an end to conflict between peoples and races and nations?
I certainly hope that there will be more opportunities to see greater peace. For example, we see far more work going on now in coalition and allies. We see bigger and bigger alliances being set up. That must be a good thing if it's going to persuade any potential aggressor or anybody who's trying to make trouble that he's likely to find himself against a strong and formidable alliance, which may deter him from getting himself into the sort of difficulty which subsequently causes loss of life.
So in a way you put your faith in politics rather than gunfire?
I put my faith in having good, sensible alliances which can work in times of crisis, as they did during the Kosovo campaign, and which will hopefully eventually persuade people that it is simply not worth taking on democratic states.
First Sea Lord, thank you very much indeed. Peter.
Thank you, David. For more than half this century, the men and women of BBC News have reported from every corner of the globe on the events that have shaped our lives. All too often they've borne witness to horror. One correspondent whose dispatches have so vividly chronicled the darkest side of human nature is Fergal Keane. He's been looking back, but you may find some of the images in his report disturbing.
A gate that opens onto memory, Auschwitz in the last days of our century. Along these final yards of track, the doomed thousands were shunted to the gas chambers.
It was here inside the camp that people were driven off the trains onto this platform for the selection. Those who were to be spared for a while to work as slave labourers were sent that way. Those who were to die immediately in the gas chambers, the women and children, the old and the sick, were sent that way. In all, 1.5 million people were murdered here.
The Auschwitz survivor Primo Levi described the moment of selection. In an instant, he wrote, our women, our children, our parents had gone. We saw them for a while as an obscure mass at the end of the platform. Then we saw nothing more. These photographs were taken by SS guards. A few moments later, the children were dead.
The horror of what was done here in the gas chambers and crematoria of Auschwitz hasn't been forgotten. But the memory of the Holocaust hasn't been enough to stop genocide being committed again. At the trial of the Nazi leaders responsible for all of this, one of the judges said he hoped that the second half of our century might be able to redeem the first half. Now, as the century draws to a close, we know there's been no such redemption. Because in Africa, Asia, here in Europe, crimes against humanity have been committed again and again.
We have lived in an age of monsters, men like Pol Pot who promised a paradise on earth, but instead sent their people to hell. In the Cambodian nightmare, millions were driven into forced labor, hundreds of thousands were murdered. This is Tol Saleng, a Khmer Rouge torture center. On the walls are the photographs of the dead, their images captured by their tormentors just before the moment of death. Every century leaves its monuments, and these, the skulls of the killing fields, are they not part of our heritage? It was in Africa, at a small church in a remote part of Rwanda, that I witnessed the reality of genocide. This was Nyarabuye, where 3,000 people were butchered because they came from the wrong ethnic group. All of the dead were Tutsis who'd gone to the house of God in search of sanctuary.
You do not just see death here, you feel it and smell it. It is as if all the good and life in the atmosphere had been sucked out and replaced with the stench of evil. There are two thoughts then, that of the mortal terror which must have been in the minds of the people who knew they were going to be killed, and the hatred and savagery in the hearts of those who were going to kill them.
In a clinic nearby, I met a survivor. Valentina had hidden under the dead bodies after her family was murdered. I thought then she would die, but Valentina and her story survived.
We were pretending to be dead. They took stones and smashed the heads of the bodies. They took little children and smashed their heads together. When they found someone breathing, they pulled them out and finished them off.
The question we struggle with, why? Why would a man kill his neighbours? How could he murder little children? And the answer isn't a comfortable one, for this has been done not by devils, but by human beings. And in Yarrabuye, as in Auschwitz and Cambodia, the ordinary killers were urged on by powerful men who promised paradise after the orgy of blood. We have seen in our time in Europe the connection between hateful words and violent deeds, between powerful men and neighbourly murder. Here in Bosnia, I saw the families of Muslim men murdered by Serb extremists trying to identify their dead. The worst horrors of our century have come about because powerful men wanted them to, and because other good men and women either looked the other way or waited too long before acting. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of our time isn't that we've become more savage, but more cynical. Primo Levi wrote of Auschwitz, "You who live secure in your warm houses, who return at evening to find hot food and friendly faces. Consider if this is a man who labours in the mud, who knows no peace, who fights for a crust of bread, who dies at a yes or no. Consider that this has been. I commend these words to you. Repeat them to your children."
Fergal Keane, a century that has seen so much to mourn, a century that cries out to us to learn the lessons of history, the cries of those persecuted because of who they are or what they believed. And one warning from history that stands out, as Fergal Keane has just reminded us, is the suffering of the Jewish people. Rabbi Julia Neuberger has been looking back at the Holocaust and its aftermath.
As we remember and reflect, we cannot help thinking about the appalling suffering that some human beings have inflicted on others during the course of this past millennium. For us Jews, we're not approaching the year 2000. We're in our 6th millennium already, the year 5760. Nevertheless, we too are thinking about remembrance and about people that we have lost. But we do not sit alone. When we remember those who have perished, we remember them whoever they are, Jew or Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Armenian, Gypsy, homosexual, all the people who have perished at the hands of others. As I light this memorial candle, I say the Kaddish, Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, the memorial prayer said by countless generations of Jews in the past, but it's actually a prayer about the greatness of God. And it ends with a prayer for peace. May he who makes peace in the high places bring peace for us, for all Israel, and for all humanity. Human beings are remarkably resilient. Let us actually celebrate that resilience and use that idea of us all surviving to rebuild and build for another millennium. Hu Ya'aseh Shalom. May he bring peace for us all, and let us help him do it.
Rabbi Julia Neuberger. Well, the sun is setting. It's setting all over the United Kingdom, but it's setting over Belfast. And there's the picture now. It's setting, let us hope, on 30 years, the 30 years that ended this century of troubles in a troubled century. And there can't be a person there who doesn't hope that when it rises again, it will be truly a new dawn. Indeed, one place where the lessons learned, say, in Johannesburg from Nelson Mandela may have struck a chord was Belfast. And just as South Africa has been transformed, so peace in Northern Ireland brings new hope. One man who's followed each and every turn on the sometimes tortuous path to peace in the province is the BBC's Dennis Murray, who has this special report.
You can have my heart if you don't mind broken things. You can have my heart if you don't mind these tears. But I heard that you make all things new, so I give these pieces all to you. If you want it, you can have my heart.
That was Juliet Turner from County Tyrone singing at last year's memorial service for those killed in the Omagh bombing. And while that was one specific occasion of horror, those words and that